Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthe Frangiotis of the Drawing Room in downtown New Bedford, and we're hosting this evening a virtual cocktail tasting featuring locally made Westport Rivers Vermouths. With me this evening are Corey Nuffer of Westport Rivers. Hi, Corey.
Hello.
Chris Goyer, assistant winemaker.
Hey guys.
Hello. Chris Goyer.
Hey guys.
And Jessika Blair. So it sounds like we have a little audio issue.
Yes, we do.
I hear that.
Okay. Sounds like it went away.
Good.
We're in a wormhole.
Okay. I'm Anthe, Corey, Jessica, and Chris. Welcome, everyone. How's everyone holding up with the COVID situation?
Wow.
I'm drinking a lot, so it's giving me time to create my craft cocktails.
Yeah, good for you, Chris.
And the winery's still running, so I'm going to work every day. Fortunately, mostly alone in the warehouse. So.
And you're working on a new seasonal right now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are you starting that process?
It's a recipe I've been working on for like a year and a half, a little more now. I only do it when it's, not a time waster. I can't spend days working on a recipe, so it kind of takes a while. I make it on the side of other batches of vermouth, but that's a floral, like forest themed, kind of spring seasonal. That hasn't really found its final recipe yet. It's getting really close though. Maybe this is the spring it finally comes out.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to walk us through a little bit of the process and history of vermouth, because as Corey and I have talked, it's misunderstood. I mean, most people, when you say drink vermouth, it's you end up getting a funny look.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing is that vermouth can be almost anything. It's aromatized wine. The word vermouth does come from the word for wormwood, vermouth, and generally it always has wormwood in it, but it can just be aromatized wine, botanicals and wine. I always fortify it. You can use a high percent wine as a base, but I have a champagne base is around 11-12 fortified with brandy that I always do. Vermouth is originally from Italy and France, the bordering region. And there are places with winemaking, and it's what's the word? That region, the Alpines, like really, really rich in different botanicals. So they ended up with botanicals and wine. It got popular, and I'm not the biggest on the history of vermouth. I've just been making it for a few years now, and I was very lucky to have taken over the vermouth program at Westport Rivers after Paul Goodchild really graciously let me start making the vermouth. It's about 2.5 years ago, actually. And he started that program, and I've seen his notes over the past years. And, I kind of, every time I make a batch of vermouth, sometimes I'll look back what he was doing years ago, because, we're on our fourth base wine for a lot of them. The recipes have changed. They've slowly gotten more bold tasting. And he saved batches every time. So 2-3 bottles from every batch. So I can actually go back. It's a little oxidized now, but I can actually get the taste that he was getting from his recipes, which is really lucky of me to just have available, because I just have the small amounts of botanicals in each blend that actually show through. Now, he started this program kind of with a concept. He could correct me on this, but he said it a lot, a lot of a little. these are built up between flavors built up between like 20, 25 different botanicals. Some of them, like per 5 gallons, you're adding like 0.7 grams of just one thing. And you'll see a lot of like 0.7s, 0.5s, then some bigger stuff. If you've had our sweet Prodigiosa vermouth, actually it's in the South Coast Manhattan that we're enjoying right now. That has a big bitter orange cinchona. There it is right there. Wormwood, gentian root. Gentian root is a big source of bitterness in a lot of bitter liqueurs and vermouths and amaros. Like when I was actually making a amaro for a place up in Boston, Italy, gentian root was the one thing that I really realized is the source of a lot of bitterness, balanced by a certain level of sweetness. I do enjoy using that. It's disgusting by itself, if you ask me. It needs like a big herbal bouquet. It needs something else going on. It's a very bitter flavored root.
Chris, does gentian grow anywhere down here on the South Coast?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea about that one.
I remember going to Round the Bend Farm, and they have burdock all over the place.
Yeah, we do have burdock. And actually, something I'd like to start using that is unavoidable in this area is knotweed, Japanese knotweed.
Yeah,
grows everywhere.
Yes.
I feel like I could replace burdock with knotweed and have this like rhubarby bitterness.
Yeah.
In something. It's just a matter of me pulling over the side of the road and putting some baby knotweed down.
I'm just going to introduce myself a little more as the vineyard rep for Westport Rivers. So that's why I'm involved in all this. And I've been tasked for the past 6 years to sell vermouth. If I could say a little bit about the knotweed, and this is a tangent, but it's another example of you use what you can, what's growing around you, and hopefully make some money off of it too, which I think is a lot of the origin story of vermouth. How on Earth, the restaurant in Mattapoisett that closed down, a couple years ago? They were doing I think it was a Mother's Day brunch, and we wanted to do a special cocktail with their vermouth, and we ended up doing a Bloody Mary, and we pickled Japanese knotweed and made it kind of like in lieu of a celery stick. So, although I think you could use it as a straw too. It's hollow. But with the vermouths, having to sell those, and at least for me, I was not a vermouth drinker initially. Like when I first tried even the sweet, it tasted more, and this would be like more, I would say to most people, when you try a sweet vermouth, it tastes a lot like cough syrup initially. Like that's how naive my palate was, if I could say that. And you eventually start tasting all this complexity in it. And it might just be a focus on vanilla or orange peel. And it really helps you to start making sense of everything. Anthony, your experience is a lot different than my Nordic experience, being Greek. Like, what was the liqueur you said that Chris's honey spice seasonal reminded you of?
Oh, so I'm a big fan of the honey spice, Chris. Thank you very much.
Oh, cool. Glad to hear it.
I wasn't quite sure what to put my finger on, what it was that I enjoyed so much about it in the smell. And it occurred to me later, and I shared this with Corey, that my parents used to make their own sort of home brew at home. I grew up in Pennsylvania when we moved from Greece. And we would, in the summertime, go out and pick cherries, and they would put cherries in this big, like, just glass jar. And I would, mind you, I'm like 6 when this is happening. And what I remember was like there would be liquid in it, and then a whole bunch of sugar, and then it would just sit there for months. So it was this cherry liqueur. Anyway, the spice of it reminded me of that. They used to call it Jessika.
Nice. And it's kind of funny. You mentioned like the cherry thing too, with the honey spice. So that's actually like a twist on this the Prodigio's, a sweet vermouth, with less steeping time and just slight differences in some of the botanicals. And I wanted it to have a cool like red fruit kind of thing to it, like in the background. And I used orris root, which I didn't prepare a picture for, but it's a cool root. It smells really bold, and if you look it up, you'll usually see something that says that it has a very like I saw these words indistinguishable flavor from raspberries. So I added a gram or two extra of orris root actually, and it boosted the fruit a little bit. And in a vermouth where I actually reduced the steeping time so it didn't get as bitter and as vegetal and botanic like herbal flavors. It actually kind of worked out. That was me winning it, and it worked okay. Like the honey spice was an experiment gone right.
How precise are you now? Like, do you do like a 2-week bench test where you wait for that long and you drink it or you taste it and you think, I'm gonna go an hour less next time, or
with
4 hours less? Like, is it that incremental?
If I'm using cinnamon and clove, yes. Even cardamom too. Actually, that gets
my favorite spices.
But it also gets like overwhelming, like bitter mint kind of strange flavor if you add too much. And I've dealt with like varying qualities from the same like sometimes like something just doesn't keep as well. You'll notice a slight difference of the fruit when you slice it, and now I only slice it because like I used to use whole cardamom fruit, and some of them would have holes in it, some of them were more dried, and it just sometimes the flavor would blow up, and sometimes it wouldn't be there at all. So I started cutting it just to have a little more consistency, and I was able to use a lot less of it actually.
Cardamom is a really interesting spice, and I know Corey has been gallivanting the South Coast looking for the.
You cannot find the bitters.
Oh, Lee's at Westport.
Jessica, do you want to pull up the cardamom bitters?
I have some too.
Okay, so we'll
flash that on the screen, Jessica.
She had it earlier. Your turn. So those are available at Lee's of Westport. That's correct, right?
Can I add to this? I called and went to about 10 different places looking for this, and one of the places I went to took me aside and said that cardamom and lemon bitters right now, apparently there's this nationwide shortage, or distributor shortage at least, because so many people are making cocktails right now. So this is an interesting world we live in. I actually haven't tried the cardamom bitters just by itself. Has anyone done that?
I did a couple days ago. Yeah, it's you don't taste the wine. Yeah.
Wow, that's so good.
So when you, Chris, I have a question for you about starting the vermouth process, and you certainly don't need to give up any trade secrets here. But could you walk us through just like a simple version of how a vermouth is made?
Yeah. So first, choose a base wine. I'm super lucky at Westport Rivers because we have so much French method wine with a really nice bold acidity. That stuff doesn't really happen in the vermouth world. But if I was going, say, I wanted to make a vermouth at home, I'd go to the liquor store. If I wanted a floral herbal vermouth, I might look at stuff like Riesling or maybe like a Pinot Blanc. But, generally I want something not too bold to start with. If I want like an orange, bitter, herbal vermouth, really. So across the board, I use champagne, but there's a lot of options. And the only way to really learn is to try different bases. So base wine, I would definitely fortify it. You want a sweetness. You can use burnt sugar. You can just use cane sugar. any of the forms of sugar are really fine. Or I wish I had more of this at my disposal, was oxidized grape juice. I've had some wonderful French vermouths with oxidized grape juice as the source of sugar.
Wow.
Which, I mean, I like the taste of raisin. If you've had any of the common vermouths on the shelf, you're going to get a raisiny note to it like that. That's a lot of that can be from either oxidized wine or oxidized grape juice. Now, botanical blends are different because you can absolutely do anything. So it's hard to say what you should do to start making a vermouth. But for this sweet vermouth, you want bitter, you want fruit, you want an herbal background, and you don't want anything to be too overpowering. Your big ones are going to be orange peel, though. There's no trade secrets here. I'm just not going to give you my specific weights and everything for the recipes. That's a little too much. But bitter orange peel is super important. Good luck finding fresh bitter orange.
What's the difference between bitter orange and just regular orange peel?
It's in the name. Sorry.
That's it.
There's bitter orange peel, sweet orange peel. Those are the two I have in large quantities, actually. And if you're looking,
no, I don't know.
One is bitter and one is sweet.
Yeah, and
We'll just leave it at that.
If you're going to go shopping for botanicals too, and if you have a local source for botanicals, that's amazing. I use dried because since I'm selling it to the public, I can kind of, be assured that there's some consistency. So I go to Penn Herbs, that's PENN Herbs, and they have such a selection. So this is Nature's Wonderland, that's the brand they sell. And you will be amazed at what you can buy on this website. Just like, there's got to be over 1,000 different botanicals you can get for absolutely everything. And a lot of them are wild harvested and organic, which is nice.
Chris and I have been talking about this for years, of doing something completely local, completely sourced. Eva's Garden. I mean, what? Have we been talking about this for maybe 5 years? It's been a while. It's like a dream.
It would be super cool.
Yeah.
I need to buy a dehydrator. Actually, at some point in my life.
Is this bitter orange or sweet orange that we're looking at?
That's bitter orange. They look very similar though, so I could just lie.
Someone will know. Chris, can I walk you back a little bit? Just to make sure people understand what you said. You were talking about when you first start with the wine, you had mentioned champagne method. I think most people don't realize you're actually saying champagne, like the bubbles.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Deliciousness, like our RJR. Stuff that's been served in the White House, you'll purposefully just pop and throw it in a carboy and steep the herbs and put the brandy in there.
It's very satisfying to open like 25 bottles of champagne in a row. It's nice.
So exotic. Who knew?
I'm a little spoiled with my vermouth making. But, there's actually like a really nice aspect to using a simple wine, like a really simple Pinot Grigio. Actually recommended from a wine, one of the wine guys at Yankee Spirits, Volpe Rosa, I think it was called. And I bought it years ago, and I still remember it was such a simple, inexpensive Pinot Grigio, and I loved it because I didn't think about it much. And that's kind of how we sold it. And even yesterday, I was thinking, like, because I'm talking about vermouth right now. I was trying to mentally prepare myself. That would be really cool. Like, what am I going to recommend for a wine?
We have a freeze frame.
Yeah, a technical difficulty there. Corey, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Chris was he used the royal we at one point. He when he was in his earlier days had worked at Yankee, so he got to know there. I mean, this would be in Swansea. Just an amazing selection of wine, very big. A lot of people who know what they're doing there. So he had started thinking about vermouth when he was barely legal to drink.
For people at home.
Oh,
hi, Chris.
Still have Chris. Can you hear us? All right, we'll be back.
Yeah, hopefully he'll
I wanted to point out that these smaller bottles of vermouth with the Westport Rivers Grace Prodigiosa, and then there's this will be Chris's handwriting. Jess is displaying this so well. Oh, let me just finish up, Chris. These small bottles are the ones where the base of it will be the champagne method. So these are the extra special ones. And Anthe carries several selections. And then Anthe also carries one that we do where the base was Chardonnay. So that's the Field and Forest. Does anyone have a bottle of that handy?
No.
Downstairs.
Okay, but it's delicious.
It's so good. You'll have to go to Anthe's to see it for yourself.
I think we actually have it on our online shop, and Liz will probably pull it up for me in a second here. But Chris, I think we may have lost you to talking. You were probably talking to internet.
Some wine bases. Yeah. I was talking about wine bases. I think I ended with Volpe Rosa and like a simple, like inexpensive Pinot Grigio as a base. But also think about the flavors of wines you love, and also always support local businesses. Like if I were to choose a Westport Rivers wine, floral vermouth, citrus vermouth, I would go right to a Riesling. But our Five Dogs, that is a little more mild, a little less acidic, and you could do a lot with that. You can do almost anything with that one.
Have you been practicing?
That's quite a nice wine. The Five Dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, fruit salad
I
wine.
really enjoyed that, and people, customers here in the drawing room have also enjoyed it. It's good. Yeah, it's been a good fit. So this selection here, the I can't say it, Prodigiosa.
Prodigiosa.
Yeah,
Sounds like Harry Potter stuff.
Do either of you want to elaborate on it? This one is a sweet, and this one is a sweet, and then the Field and Forest is a little less sweet. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that's a dry vermouth. I had nothing to do with that, actually. That was either that was mainly Bill Russell, or it was Bill and Paul. I know Paul was doing the Prodigiosas. I think Bill Russell might have done the Field and Forest recipe. Insane amounts of vanilla in that one. I really like that. And there's just nice herbaceous notes to it. I think it makes a wonderful martini.
It makes a really great honey poached pear.
Oh, yes, Andy, do tell.
So, for this past Christmas, I was having dinner with friends when we were gathering. And I found a recipe for honey poached pears with burrata cheese.
Sick.
So that's what I chose to make for dessert. And Ori suggested that I try it with the Field and Forest because the recipe did call for a vermouth. It was excellent. I can share it with anybody who's interested. So
good. That's my go-to with tonic, and then just some sort of citrus. And every once in a while, I live on the wild side and get some hard cider, and then pour a little of the Field and Forest in there. And it is it brings out this, or whatever magic happens between the two. And there's this like amazing grapefruit flavor with all this nice herb and vanilla. So
Jessika, that sweet vermouth is what you're using in your cocktail. Is that correct?
I am using.
Yes, the S4.2 in Chris's handwriting.
Yes.
Unmistakable.
He gave me a little bit of a heart attack. He did tell me that every batch is a little different.
Yeah, sometimes quite. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I can't. I mean, for the sake of the competition, there's gonna. Actually, I think the 4.3. I gave Corey a bottle. I think you have one, Jessika. That is the first time I've made it where I don't actually want to change it the next time. Not out of laziness, but I just want that version to stay around for a little bit. It's very similar to the 4.2. I think it's just a little more fruity, a little more herb in the background. I upped the rosemary in it a little bit, and I just think it carries over well. And I, besides this cocktail, I don't mix it really.
I think that's one of the benefits of small batch is that it doesn't always you have to savor it in the moment. I mean, there's something to be said about consistency and, being able to mass produce something. But one of the things I've enjoyed about working with Westport Rivers is the fact that you are trying these different things and that there are, batches that you make. So.
Yeah, I mean, every change is very slow. It's hard to change something unless you're sure and you've done it before with something else and you know how that changes the flavor. We change by like 0.2 grams or even 0.08 grams, like very little increments of changes because you're making a full batch. You're not doing the little bottle. So as those things evolve, it's very gradual.
Chris, what was the first batch where you added rose petals? I was like,
that was
rose
way
petals.
back on Sweet, but I've kept rose around.
Okay.
And I mean, with my new one that I'm working on, it's the first one where I've thrown out all the old ingredients. This is the first vermouth without any wormwood, without any bitter roots, without any citrus peel. But man, I pulled the recipe up on my phone. I'll give you a quick rundown. So it's the concept of it is that it's like the forest and the field, things that grow between them. So, usually not citrus trees around here in a field. That doesn't really happen. But calendula, like marigold, chamomile, elderflower, sage, thistle. Actually, my new favorite thing is blueberry leaves. Wonderful aroma. I smelled the bag. It's something that was never in any of the ingredient lists I've used, but I was just intrigued by it because it's such a common plant here to find in the woods. Arborvitae, actually, is one of my favorite smells. Of course, every time I make a vermouth, I smell the bag of plants. It's really satisfying. It gets me through it. Rose, pine, lavender, rose hips. Rose hips are like the fruit of that, actually. And, I'm not giving the weights out, but like there has to be a balance. And over like a year or so working with that recipe, I've actually cut down half the ingredients and started to balance the flowers to not make something that smells like a candle and tastes like soap. Those are the words I use to describe the batches I haven't loved. Fortunately, those were small batches, just a bottle at a time, but I've made a lot of soap.
Chris, are you describing the new seasonal, the spring?
Yeah. Well, not with the soap and the candle part, but yeah. I think I fixed that. The flowers are delicate in nature and in flavors. So I mean, you just got to use them carefully.
When are you thinking that can be for sale?
I don't know. That also requires, more tasting for people that will sell it.
More research.
Research. More
I think
try.
Anthony and I'm sure Jessika would love to be part of that. So just.
Yeah, Jessika got a sample of it too. Corey, you did not because you had to leave the other day.
You don't need to brag, Anthony. So, Jessika, what
it reminded me.
Can you talk about what you thought because you've been drinking our sweet vermouth for years. Like what flavors in it were you thinking, oh, this will be so good with the Woodford, the bourbon, like the Manhattan, like was it the citrus, the overall, the herb? How does a mixologist like start to do the calculus about how these different ingredients dance with each other?
So Jessika is part of a cocktail competition. I don't know if she's getting ready to share it with us or not, but she's a South Coast mixologist who has been using the sweet vermouths for quite some time in her drinks. And is it Woodford that has the competition going now, Corey? I think Jessica's having a little bit of issue with audio, so let's.
Yeah, I bet she's getting some scrambled sounds over there.
I can't hear anyone but Chris.
Aha! So, Chris, why don't you?
Please convey what I just said, sir.
Oh, I wish I was paying more attention. I thought I had a break.
Have her just
I think so.
If
I
you could
believe
relate.
Corey just asked
Introduce
you
Jessica and her
about
cocktail.
how you came up with using the sweet vermouth in this cocktail. How you took the flavors of the vermouth, worked with the whiskey and the bitters to make what you created. Was I right, Corey? Just say yes or no.
Yes,
Okay,
so
good.
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 Okay,
Okay,
Better
that was
than I
right.
could have done it.
So Corey started coming into Airport Grill, oh gosh,
Years
it
ago.
was 2-3 years ago now, and I was just taking over the restaurant. It's been a minute, and she introduced me to the vermouth, and my first thought was, I have to make a cocktail with this because this is amazing and it's local, and I am a huge advocate for anything that's local, especially if it tastes fantastic, which it did. So I had actually originally done this cocktail with the Northeaster from Nantucket Brewery, which does the Cisco Brewery beers. And I got an email this past fall where they were like, hey, this is liquor.com. We're looking for people to compete in the Manhattan Classic for Woodford Reserve. You have to use their bourbon, but we want your original Manhattan recipes. And my first thought was, well, this is fantastic. I'm absolutely going to see what this tastes like with the Westport Rivers vermouth. So I had to pick the vermouth. I had to pick the bitters. I had to pick everything, basically the garnish, because classically a Manhattan gets a cherry. So I sat with my mom and actually experimented on cocktails with the Woodford Reserve and the Westport Rivers vermouth. And I realized that because it's already in it, the cardamom, which is super in vogue right now, brought out the flavors of that. And the orange peel, when you brulee it, takes an entirely different taste than a regular orange peel. But that with it brought out the vanilla in both the bourbon and in the vermouth, which gave it a really nice flavor. So that's how I came up with what I call the South Coast Manhattan. And it's pretty fantastic.
So, Jessica,
And
can you
there's the
tell us
recipe
a
right
little
there.
bit about the? Can you tell us a little bit about the competition? Chris, can you translate that?
Jessica, can you tell us a little bit about the competition here in?
Thank you, Chris, because you're the only one I can hear. So right now, what I did was I submitted my recipe for the regionals, and I was chosen for the regional competition, the top 10 in the region, which our region, I don't know who applies to what area, but I do know that Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire do not have their own regionals. So they either have to apply to Boston, to Providence, or to New York. So I was chosen for the top 10 in our region. And as of right now, I'm waiting. We're hoping to do the competition in September. Obviously, this has changed a little bit due to COVID. It was supposed to be this past April. So in September, we're supposed to go to Boston. We compete. I bring my ingredients. Everybody else brings theirs. We have a panel of 3 to 4 judges that we present the drink to. They taste it. Out of that, they're going to choose a winner from the regional. And then the 40 regionalists from across the United States get together. We get an all expense paid trip to Kentucky to compete at the distillery for Woodford Reserve. And once there, they try our cocktails also. They choose the top 6 people from the entire country, and the top 6 gets an all expense paid trip to Manhattan to compete for the ultimate Manhattan, essentially.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool.
Chris, you have to say wow.
It's definitely.
Oh, wow. Sorry, I'm actually quite invested in this, in you winning this competition. I'm just
super
thrilled someone's
invested
using
myself.
this vermouth.
The idea that I could bring this vermouth to Kentucky and to Manhattan and show everybody there how fantastic it is makes me super excited.
Yes.
It's a great way to promote our region in general. So we do actually have a question from the South Coast Almanac, and our friends there want to ask Chris, how did you get into this?
I'm very lucky. It's actually kind of strange. I was applying at breweries. I have a background, like since I was 21, I got a job at a liquor store, and it kind of started there. I got really involved and interested in just well-made products. And, I saw myself learning how to brew, working at a brewery. I always saw myself in customer service. After turning 25, 26, customer service started to get a little old. I was working at large liquor stores, a tiny one, I've sold a lot of nips of Fireball. My time. And I was applying at a brewery and waiting to hear back. It was a little ways away. And for some reason, like a taster at one of the liquor stores I was working at, that's now a great friend of mine, she said, like, oh, well, I work at this winery, and email this person. And with my musical background, it just worked out. They needed a sound guy. They needed some guy to work farmers markets. And it just went from there. I still do the sound, hopefully this year too, for the Sunset Music Series at Westport Rivers. And that was kind of my foot in the door. And I say yes a lot. This is the longest job I've ever held because I didn't want to leave. I work for good people, a great business, and like where else can I get this kind of experience working with Champagne Method stuff? And then the Vermouth program fell in my lap. I actually give Corey some credit. I think she told Paul, when he became the winemaker, she recommended me to be the back of the house guy for him to train. And that really worked out. I'm very happy to be learning what I'm learning now. And I don't know, like, unless I lived in California and got a job at one of those large wineries that produce French method wine, well, first off, I don't think they'd let me make vermouth out of it. It's a very strange situation, and it's just a good one, really, really good one, where you get into a local business and you actually get to do what you always wanted to do.
Chris, you also, though, have agricultural experience too.
Yeah, when BCC had an agricultural, like an organic agricultural program, I did a couple years of it. I've done a lot of things and never gotten a degree, actually. I've had about 4 majors, taken a lot of classes. I got some math classes to finish up still. But, that was, so that in the Vermouth, I used to volunteer on a tiny parking lot farm, actually, in Providence, off of Westminster. Now, I believe he runs Foggy Notion Farms out in Johnson. Is that Johnson? Yes, it is. Yeah. Where they sell in this area. And, I couldn't actually work in agriculture on a small scale and be able to, get paid. Like, I could get room and board, I could volunteer, which I love doing, but I always needed to have a job. So after going to school for agriculture, I branched out and wanted to get into the beer business, which transformed into not beer very quickly. But I always loved wine anyways.
So we do have another question. And it's, what's everyone's favorite way to enjoy vermouth? So Chris, if you want to ask Jessika that question, she can go first.
Jessika, from Anthe, what is your favorite way to enjoy vermouth?
Oh my gosh. Last night I was drinking it just straight out of a glass. I had the honey spiced and I have the sweet vermouth. And I also had the Field's Edge, which, by the way, is fantastic. I don't know that I would change anything about it.
I still might.
It was reminiscent of a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, where it had that grassy taste.
Wow.
Which I really loved. I just drink it straight. And then I also enjoy making cocktails with it. I was already talking to Chris about how I love to incorporate lavender in my cocktails because I think lavender is fantastic. If he came out with a lavender vermouth, I would absolutely use
Oh.
that in my lavender lemon drops.
So one of my soap batches of vermouth was the lavender version of that. My problem was once I mixed it, the lavender for some reason came out too much.
Really?
Maybe because I didn't have enough citrus with it to balance out that. I mean, lavender
come out
is
bitter?
so scary to use because of the
Yeah,
soap
it is.
aspect.
I find the best citrus to use with lavender is lemon.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, one of my good friends, Veronica, she works for Long Live Brewery in Providence. I was talking to her sister, and I was talking about my shortbread cookies. I was making elderflower shortbread cookies.
Love
I was
elderflower.
previously
That's what your
thinking
field
lavender
type
shortbread,
reminds me of.
and she told me that Veronica always makes sure she puts lemon zest in there so it doesn't taste like soap. And actually, I took that very seriously, and that got into my vermouth making like the next week on this batch. Instead of lemon, I used rose hips,
Okay.
which actually do add a lot of fruit, and it balanced it out a little more than usual.
For me, my go-to is just tonic or neat, but that reflects I just don't have a huge, for cocktailing, I'm still having to look a lot of them up. I probably have a library of maybe 7 cocktail books, and then some of them on more of the science behind, like breaking things down into, sweet, sour, salty, savory. But I find that when you have vermouth, it gives you a kick in the pants to start doing that and building up your own lexicon. So you end up, and it's expensive when you, some of these bottles, chartreuse or absinthe, anything is usually going to be around $30+ $25. So I guess, Chris, Jess, do you have any recommendations of go-to liquors? Like whether it is, I think having a bourbon, maybe a rye, vodka, if you're going to, vodka, gin, of course. But do you have any other, Negronis, I feel, are so in. They have been for a couple years, but especially right now. I was at Ball Square Fine Wines a couple weeks ago, and they had an end cap. It was more like a pile of Campari. And I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, I need a bottle. And he said, we're barely able to keep them in stock. So Campari is one. That's a go-to of mine. But what other like, as you're building your cocktail library, what do you recommend for a couple?
Chris, you have to answer by asking the question first, so Jessica knows what the question is.
Good point. Yeah, I forgot about that. I'm the translator.
And if you can repeat Corey's question, I'll give you $500.
All right.
I have been drinking.
So
Deliciousness.
Corey said something in a lot of words. I'm going to put it into like way less. That's our differences between us.
You think?
Let's see. If you could pick like a couple bottles, like to start building your bar with, what are your go-tos? Like, what do you need to have?
Oh boy.
For vermouth
For
cocktails.
Definitely.
For vermouth. Yeah.
For
Okay.
vermouth,
So
it would be you guys.
Yeah.
Or vermouth cocktails.
To build my bar. As far as, let's see. So I've got my bourbon and my vermouth covered. My vodka would probably be, honestly, Tito's. It's the most popular and most versatile vermouth currently on the market, if I didn't go with Cisco Brewery's 8-Ball vodka, just because it's local. I love everything local. I don't think their vodka is the best, but I do try to keep everything local. Tequila, there is a great place in Salem that I can't think of the name of right now that I tried when I was running the airport grill. That was phenomenal, that I could not get my owner on board for. that was actually a brewery in Salem that makes tequila, rum, vodka, and bourbon. And their tequila was right up there with some of the best tequilas I've ever tried in my life.
Wow.
As far as wine goes, I would absolutely stock Westport Rivers. I would also, let's see, there's so many classic things that you just have to keep behind a bar, even if you don't want to, just because people ask for them. Kendall Jackson, things like that. But then you could do the whole taste this, try this, and compare and contrast against the other ones and get people off of that. Hopefully move away from it. You have your liquors that have been around forever that people just automatically gravitate towards, but they are not the best. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but definitely Westport Rivers for my vermouth, my wine, Woodford Reserve for my bourbon, Tito's for my vodka, and the place in Salem that I cannot remember for my tequila because it was so good and I'll never forget trying it.
Chris, can you ask Jessika to turn back to the cocktail, her Manhattan, and walk us through the flavors she gets? I mean, she was a little bit talking about the vanilla that really comes out with the brulee orange peel. Maybe you can even add too, because we haven't asked you about your own description of the sweet vermouth and then how that goes with, you know, the whiskey, especially for people who aren't necessarily Manhattan drinkers.
All right. So Jessika, Corey's asking for you to like kind of describe what you taste in your cocktail, like the flavor profiles of your cocktail.
Okay, so I did not have the time to brulee my orange. I know that's terrible. It's actually not as good when you don't brulee the orange. But I definitely taste a heavy flavor of vanilla when I drink this cocktail. It kind of takes out the smokiness of the bourbon when you add in the vermouth, you add in the cardamom, and you add in the bruleed orange. It really makes it a sweeter cocktail than your typical Manhattan, yet it still holds up against regular Manhattans. Hold on, I gotta try it. It obviously pulls out the flavors of orange because you have the orange peel in there, but the vanilla, the orange, and it definitely has a spice note that I wouldn't absolutely say is the cardamom, but you can feel a spice on your tongue. And when the orange is bruleed, it's totally different. It brings out an even deeper taste of that vanilla bean and that smokiness that the bourbon has.
Yeah, definitely great spice to it. I mean, I even get like things that don't exist in it, like nutmeggy kind of notes. I mean, it's really nice how it
Yeah.
works.
Right, it is. It's like almost like the pumpkin pie spice.
Chris, when I was first telling you about Jess, when I mentioned the cardamom bitters, you lit up and said, "Oh yeah, I would have gone with those." And I was like, "What? Wow!"
Well, I've been on so I love orange bitters. I don't use Angostura that much just because I'm so familiar with the flavors. I know what it does, and when I make myself a cocktail, I don't want to make what I get. I need something a little different, and I'm at home, so nobody cares because nobody's here. So chocolate bitters has been my go-to. A combination of chocolate and cardamom is pretty great, actually. I gotta say.
I was gonna say I've got that Aztec chocolate bitters.
The in thing right now.
Yeah, it's nice in whiskey. Lavender bitters is something I need to get into a little more, but I keep putting flowers in vermouth, so I don't know if I should buy that because I want to put it in the vermouth. Like there's a weird thing where I don't want to use orange bitters because I have so much orange in my vermouth, so that's why I chose chocolate. I wouldn't use Angostura with the honey spice because it's already a little clovey. When you're using, I don't want to say weird vermouth, different vermouth. You have to use a different bitters if you're using a bitters. I think that's a decent way to put it.
Okay, can we segue from that? Channing's daughter. Am I saying that right? Is it daughter or daughters?
I haven't actually. So when I first tasted, I'm a big squash guy. First off, I love squash. Tonight my snack is raw summer squash, like chips, but with cheese on it, so it's not healthy. They made a butternut squash vermouth, and it was just out of this world. The part of what I love about being in Providence, New Bedford has some good spots too for craft bars, but Fortnite, Providence.
Yes.
I can go there and say, like, I want something strange or something I haven't had before, and I can. They'll tell me about it, and I'll look up the words they said when I get home, and then I've learned something for the day. There are some craft cocktail bars and like wine bars like Fortnite and Cortland Club in the Federal Hill area that really actually have. Like, I can choose between 8 different vermouths to try.
Yes.
That's so cool to try that. Like, butternut squash is savory. Imagine using dried butternut in a vermouth.
So Channing daughters also I had one that had cantaloupe in it. I mean, like, I don't know how many things, but the time I went, they had maybe 5 different vermouths there. So that's on the South Fork of Long Island. And places that are doing these craft cocktails, I've had some deliciousness at D&B Burger, at Cultivator Shoals, and then even the Westporter right by the vineyard. They are killing it. So it's this, I've been trying to sell vermouth for the vineyard for 6 years. And in the past 3 years or so, I mean, it's really taken off where restaurants are even making their own vermouth and own infused fortified wines. So it makes my job a lot easier. But it's this larger change that's happening with people. Chris, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about if making vermouth for just regular people could be a thing. And if so, what do you recommend that they use to fortify it or add some alcohol to it? Because these vermouths we're talking about are around 18% alcohol, even though they're very smooth, so you can sip them. I mean, we add something flammable to them at the winery. What do you recommend if regular folks are going to make their own?
I recommend trying, think about it at first, like what you actually want to make, and just going for it reasonably. You don't want to add, like, if you're making a bottle, one bottle at a time, like a 750 milliliter, say you have an empty wine bottle filled with wine, but maybe, like, if it's a 80 proof brandy, add like 100 milliliters of brandy, start there, fill it up with wine and the sugars you want. If you want, like, so say like a Moscato, a sweet Moscato, that's probably like 25, 30 grams of sugar per liter, maybe. I mean, it all varies, but that's pretty sweet stuff. If you want a sweet vermouth, try like, 20 grams for a 750 milliliter bottle with about 100 milliliters of brandy and your base wine. Start there, reduce things as you want. It's for your house. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is just experiment, or also don't buy the vermouth I make. But experimenting at home is wicked cool because you have the opportunity to use the spices you want. I've had just the other day actually. Back to my friends, like, I tried a vermouth with huge like marjoram like notes. Like, you could actually taste like what herbs were in there distinctly. About like one full truckload of vanilla beans that must have cost like thousands of dollars to make this one bottle because it tasted like so much real vanilla. Like, it was just incredible. Like we go in a different way where you don't taste the particular herbs in it, but there's other methods that are completely fine and wicked good. And I'd like to do more like that. But oregano, Anthe, you're Greek, I'm Greek. Oregano is kind of a go-to. Lemon, I like lemon. You kind of have to. Oregano forward vermouth is really intriguing, and if you like that, don't think of it like your chicken and oregano dish. It tastes completely different with the fruit and acid and complexity of a wine, with the brandy and the sugars and the background that you make to support that.
Yeah.
So, just take the things you like, look some stuff up, because there are so many vermouths and types of vermouths made throughout history, like cinchona heavy vermouths, wormwood heavy, gentian root heavy. It's just you can't screw up, and if you do screw up, do something different, reduce it. That's part of learning.
Can you use just simple syrup as your sweetener? Just because so many people are familiar with that? Or do you recommend just full on sugar?
Just cane sugar, because why add water?
Yeah.
We're all at our homes in a virtual cocktail hour. Why add water?
Okay. I think you should. I would love to do this myself, but I'm terrified that I'd pick herbs that would be not terrified. I'm not terrified. No one's terrified of making vermouth, except if I was gathering what I thought was one herb and it ended up being something else and I died. That I could easily see me seeing something in a ditch or something.
Okay, so you're like foraging, yeah.
I know, because that's the cool thing. This is how this all started with Europeans seeing things growing and adding them to their wine.
There's books for that.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I would love if you did almost a make your own vermouth class, because this idea of making a liquid that's very intentionally unbalanced, where you could really taste the marjoram or the oregano, versus one which I think by and large Westport Rivers does, where they're very balanced, where there's this complicated, well-balanced tapestry or ambient of flavor, and which also makes it very complicated. And when you add, different gins and things, you get these amazing explosive flavors that are unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that huge complex part is about Paul's base too, that I inherited, that I constantly screw with nowadays. But, I think I'd like to actually, Corey, now that you've said all this, you have to do that now.
I do, I think Anthe should do her cherry. Yes, I want to see a big bottle of cherries when I walk into the drawing room again. And Chris, is it too late for Jess to try to quickly do a demo and make the Manhattan?
That's why I was going to pop in to see if Jess could perhaps make her drink for us.
Okay.
And then also I want you guys to think about, I'm a vermouth novice. So you've gone deep into, so Corey's going to go foraging, Anthony's going to, she's going to focus on cherries. So as Jess takes us through her drink, I want you to think about, how are you going to get me to start drinking vermouth? What do I need to know to stop being afraid? Because basically all you'll see in my place is wine. What do I need to do? So with that, hopefully, Chris, you can throw it over.
It's a 10-part plan.
It's a 10-part plan. And then I'll disappear.
No worries. I was trying to find my grandfather's torch, and I cannot find it, and they're not here because they went to my uncle's house.
Oh.
So,
Chris, if you can tell Jess, I have a torch.
So Corey can show you what a torch looks like. Give me a second.
There it is.
Hear me again.
Okay.
So there it is. Anyone who's worked at a restaurant where you have creme brulee, you know this piece of equipment well. And
That is
I just felt I needed one in my own house.
Everyone should have one.
Everyone should have one. Self-defense or cooking on a
Essential for
weekday night.
making drinks, desserts.
So we use the torch.
I'm running around the kitchen now to do this quick. So first off, you're going to need some sugar. Just put it on a plate. And now you have your orange. And you don't want to cut too far into the skin because you don't want all of that white bit on the inside. So you're gonna. I need to grab a new orange. The middle of the orange is the perfect place to do it. Hold on. I didn't know I was going to be put on the spot. Okay,
Oh!
So full orange. You're just going to see how I am not getting the white part of the orange while I am cutting this. That's what you want for your garnish. You can eat the rest of the orange. You don't need to do anything.
I like
crazy.
knowing that we don't have to sacrifice the orange
Yeah, don't
entirely.
sacrifice it.
Cocktail.
Eat it. So then squeeze some of the orange juice onto the peel because that's what's going to pick up your sugar. So you have sugar on here. And then I'm going to move this over. This is kind of scary. I don't normally do this on the burner. Can you guys see it?
You know, that's my only method right now. It's a little extra crispy, but once it's, you know,
It's not my
once it's
method,
going.
so I'm a little nervous. Right
Oh,
now.
you used a way bigger peel. You're
Well,
So,
it's
Chris,
a garnish. It needs to be nice and big. So we're going to brulee the orange. Normally, I would do this with a torch. Just go over it. Ow! You just want that sugar to kind of burn to the orange. Let me put you guys back up here. Hey. And then you're going to twist it before it gets too hot where it can't twist, because once the sugar solidifies, you cannot twist it. You can put it on the side of the glass, in the glass. I'm going to just throw it into my glass. So you need some ice. You're going to do 3 ounces of the Woodford Reserve Classic Bourbon. Honestly, the double oak is fantastic too. You could use that. But for this contest, I used their Classic. So am I still here? Damn phone calls. You guys see me?
No, I see just a black screen. What's going on?
I got a phone call.
Oh.
Jessica's very popular, and everyone wants to talk to her live while she's
All right,
making her
for a
cocktail for
second,
us.
I'm going to log off and log back in.
Okay.
So while
So,
Jessica
actually,
does that,
yeah, my good friend Denny actually recommended tongs. That's my method,
Yeah.
even though I have the worst tongs that exist. And I actually dropped many peels in my first attempt. It does work quite well.
If I could, I had that problem. So
Okay.
and when, oh, she's back.
welcome back, Jess.
I'm back. So apparently when you tell people I'm going to be done at 6 o'clock, they start calling at 6:02. So put your 3 ounces of your bourbon, and then you're going to do a couple, 2 to 3 dashes of the cardamom, depending on how much you love cardamom. I do 3 personally, but for the recipe, it's 2. And then you're going to do 3/4 of an ounce of the vermouth. You're going to stir, don't shake. You never shake your Manhattan. Please use tongs. Thank you, Denise. I could use tongs, but I'm in my mom's kitchen and I was trying to be quick. Don't ever shake your Manhattan because it actually loses some of its delicious flavor. And then just strain it into the glass with your orange peel. And there you have your delicious South Coast Manhattan.
Delicious.
It is so delicious. It really is. All these flavors together really creates a beautiful profile that you don't get from a typical Manhattan at the restaurant.
Oh.
Cheers.
Yay. Cheers.
So, Jessica, what was the difference between having the drink with the brulee orange peel versus not? Because in the beginning, you were drinking the one without the brulee, right?
I was. So without the brulee, it definitely has a more bitter taste to it. A stronger orange flavor that actually bruleeing the orange peel kind of pulls that out. And it gives it more of a vanilla and a creamy flavor that goes really well with the bourbon.
I love that.
Yeah, it's totally different. If you brulee it versus you don't, it's a completely different flavor profile.
So Corey, you were talking about how Vermouth is seeing this, this growth in popularity recently. Why did Vermouth kind of have a bad rap before now?
So I was one of those, and I've talked with Jessika about this too. Like when you're trained as a bartender, by and large, your training is not good. It's not accurate. You keep it in the well, your bottle of vermouth. It's a low end vermouth, which is a lot of restaurants don't have money to be making their well cocktails with a high end small batch vermouth. So, and it's fine. And so the institutional understanding of vermouth is that you're out of your mind to ever drink it neat. So it's not that when you suggest drinking vermouth neat that people don't know what you're talking about. It's that a lot of people, especially people who've had just enough training to be dangerous, they're offended. Like the idea is repulsive to them. So it makes it that much harder to get, to spread the word. When you start Googling for answers, you're going to come up pretty quickly with it's prohibition that ruined everything. So before prohibition, Americans were doing a lot of very cool things with their alcohols. We were aging gins in wine barrels, and our vermouths were very similar to what was happening in Europe. After prohibition, everything started to become more of this Mad Men era. Like we want as little flavor as possible. We want as much vodka as possible. And that approach to vermouth has never changed until recently, which is fascinating because it's happening everywhere. In November, I'm from the Midwest, from Minnesota, South Dakota area, and the sun is messing my light scheme. There's so many craft cocktail bars in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Like it's everywhere. And I find it, I don't know why. I think it bodes well for the future that so many places are doing these high-end craft cocktails. Because the more you know about the ingredients in your cocktail, especially if they're local, it's transformative. It changes what it means to spend that extra couple of dollars. It makes you feel like that you're supporting local business and with deliciousness. Okay. Like it's just politicizing in a good way your Manhattan, which we all have to agree is good.
Yes, going off what Corey said, I just want to say this is kind of funny. I use Lee's bitters, and if you go to the back, it actually says for your pre-prohibition cocktails.
Oh, yes, I didn't catch that.
So it is right there in black and white. We use pre-prohibition vermouth and pre-prohibition bitters to make our cocktails.
Oh, so good.
That's awesome. I love how that came full circle. Nicely done.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it just makes it that much more special.
It really does. And I think you guys have done a really good job talking about your love of vermouth and why we should be drinking it. And so even, people like myself who've never really enjoyed it before, now my interest is piqued. And so I hope people out there in cyberspace who are also joining us and who eventually watch this after, have the same, thought process. And, Chris, maybe you'll have a few people who will start, trying to follow your, your lavender vermouth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of excited. I got to make it a little different. I'm going to change it a tiny bit for the final batch. I just, I got to get some opinions.
But what he does, I'm the first one to make a cocktail with it.
I think that's fair.
I mean, that depends on how quick you are with making a cocktail.
She threw down.
Because I have this much in my apartment right now, and actually, I have no ingredients. Never mind, I can't.
So Jessika, you get to make the first cocktail. That's how it's going to work because we have witnesses. We have all the internet watching. It is said, it is done. So I want to, on behalf of Anthony and the drawing room, I want to thank you guys for coming and spending your time with us. Anthony's just having a little bit of an audio issue, which is why you guys are seeing my face.
Oh, hello.
And right now we're showing a very sexy photo of a vermouth cocktail. Corey, where is this? Where is this picture from?
Oh, is it
the
Dolce in New York City?
Dolce in New York City. So we want to just leave you with this idea that vermouth isn't what you might think it is. Vermouth is delicious. It is sexy. It is interesting. It's complicated. It's sweet. It's fascinating. And you can buy it at the drawing room. The drawing room carries vermouth and wine from Westport Rivers. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Corey, Chris, Jessica, you guys have been absolute delights to have with us. So we really appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening and finishes off their cocktail.
Oh,
Thank you.
cheers.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.